Zombie apocalypse.
All right, welcome back. We talked about Bitcoin, we introduced it. What we're going to do now is talk about, in broad strokes, 3 different ways that you can acquire Bitcoin. And this is not going to be a tutorial, a step-by-step guide on what you need to do to buy your Bitcoin right this second. We will have more detailed instructions, but we're not going to give any investment advice, by the way.
No investment advice.
But we need to talk about this to understand how Bitcoin works, actually. So there's 3 ways we're going to introduce. And the first one is to purchase Bitcoin at an exchange.
Yeah, ranked in order of the easiest to most difficult. So
Right.
the easiest way is to just buy it at an exchange.
So what's an exchange?
What's an exchange? An exchange is a private organization that exchanges cryptocurrency for other currency: dollar, euro, yen, peso, etc.
Right. Well, and actually an exchange, there's plenty of exchanges that have nothing to do with cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, foreign currency exchange.
Yeah, you want to exchange your US dollars to pesos, for example, then you can do that online, you can do that in person. But with cryptocurrencies, there are many, I don't even know how many today there are.
Oh, there's a ton of them. Yeah.
Tons and tons of these organizations that you go onto their website or you download their app on your phone and you sign up for an account. You hook up a credit card or bank account or somehow deposit money from US dollars or euros or whatever currency you have into the exchange, and then they give you some amount of Bitcoin. And we're just going to talk about Bitcoin, but some of them support other types of cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, and they typically charge a fee.
Right. So it's super, super easy. It's as easy as, sometimes it's annoying. You have to get verified, or you have to, take a couple steps along the way. It's not as easy as just buying a book on Amazon, for example, but it's almost that easy. You put in some information and you get Bitcoin. So it's easy, but that comes at a cost.
So the risk here, and the problem with exchanges, is that they're not decentralized. That means that exchanges are subject to the regulation of the jurisdiction in which they run. They're much easier to trace. So when you're signing up, you're giving them typically your driver's license or some form of identification that associates you as a person with what you're buying. And they, last but not least, they lack the security guarantees of the Bitcoin protocol. Bitcoin itself is decentralized, but exchanges are private organizations. They're centralized and they're subject to all of the problems that we discussed when we talk about Rainbow Coin.
Yeah, so we want to be clear. It still is Bitcoin, right? The Bitcoin itself is not the problem. The problem is that if you buy it through a company, whatever the company is called, Kevin's Exchange.
Kevin's Exchange is a good one.
I create my account, I give him my money, he gives me the Bitcoin. By default, the Bitcoin is still held by Kevin, basically.
I'm going to hold this Bitcoin
and
for
he
you.
just says, this is yours. I know this is Kevin, or this is Colt's Bitcoin. But he still is the one who is in charge of it. And that's how most of these exchanges work. That's what makes them so easy. You don't have to do any setup or any of the difficult work to get it into your possession. You just create an account with them and they hold it for you. But that kind of gets back to the whole problem with Rainbow Coin, which is Kevin could be a charlatan, to go back to that word.
I'm a charlatan.
Kevin could be deceitful. He could be trying to scam us, or somebody could hack into Kevin's site and he could have the best intentions, but they could steal the Bitcoin.
I become the single point of failure.
Yes.
And so now we're going to discuss the cautionary tale that is Mt. Gox.
Okay.
So Mt. Gox was an exchange that was established in Tokyo in 2010. So this is about a year after Bitcoin was released. And by 2014, it was handling 70% of all Bitcoin transactions.
Yeah, it became massive. And in today's world, it's definitely more fractured. There isn't a single exchange that has such a massive share of the market.
No, there's no longer such a monopoly. But with that monopoly, in February 2014, 850,000 Bitcoin was stolen. And at the time, that was $450 million.
Nowadays,
that'd be what? If we think of Bitcoin, the stat we'll use is $10,000 per coin. That would be $8.5 billion.
Right.
It's a massive heist. And
this was all people's Bitcoin. Like they had bought it with their own money and the exchange was holding it for them and associating it with their accounts, and it disappeared overnight.
Yeah, so they would log into the website. It would say you still have the Bitcoin, but they just could no longer withdraw it. And this is the problem with Mt. Gox being that single point of failure. It was hacked, or it's still not certain. We're not going to comment on whether or not.
Some people think it's an inside job, and there have been ongoing legal proceedings about it.
Yeah, and if you're curious, Mt. Gox, MTGOX is the way that it's spelled. If you search that, there'll be tons of articles. But in March 2014, they declared bankruptcy, and this actually really tanked the price of Bitcoin. People really lost faith in Bitcoin, and this is a common misconception. People think that because Mt. Gox was hacked, that Bitcoin was hacked. They're entirely different things. Mt. Gox was just a custodian of the underlying cryptocurrency.
So now that we've talked about how terrible some exchanges can be, or some of the shortcomings, we do want to mention, though, that it is a very accessible way of buying Bitcoin. It's how probably most people buy their first
Yeah, most entry-level people are going to buy Bitcoin this way.
And so exchanges are something that you want to have faith. You want to be able to trust. Mm-hmm. And there are so many of them out there. We're not going to endorse any particular exchange, mm-hmm. but on bitcoin.org, if you go to...
So this is the Bitcoin Foundation's website. This isn't even necessarily Bitcoin itself, but many people look at bitcoin.org as the sort of de facto authority on Bitcoin.
Right. And so they have a list on here of recommended exchanges, but they still have a disclaimer: perform your own due diligence. And they tell you this note that we'll come back to: choose a wallet where you will keep your Bitcoin. So what they're telling you is use an exchange to buy it and then move it from that exchange into your control as soon as possible.
And we'll cover what a wallet is in the coming chapters. But if you look through this list, you'll also notice some of the well-known exchanges are not on here, and that's because Bitcoin.org is engaged in the politics of Bitcoin. They've removed some of the exchanges that, in this case, I believe it's because there's a fork of Bitcoin. We'll describe that later. There's a faction of Bitcoin called Bitcoin Cash, and I believe that Bitcoin.org has removed any exchanges that support this other version of Bitcoin. So if you're interested in buying Bitcoin, it's important to do your due diligence. Just a few Google searches. If you can navigate the internet and do your best to not get phished, then you're probably well equipped enough to make a decision on where you want to spend your money and understand the risks.
So the next way, the next option of acquiring Bitcoin is to exchange it for something. So person to person, peer to peer. I sell coffee. I am a barista. Kevin comes in, he decides he wants to pay for it with Bitcoin. He can send it to me, not through an exchange, but through some sort of app. He can send it to me through an app on his phone or on a computer, pretty much anything these days, any electronic device that can connect to the internet. There's a way
that adheres to the Bitcoin protocol.
Yes. Yeah. And so we download an app. It doesn't really matter which one. We'll talk about them later on, but we both have an app. And I basically tell Kevin where to send a Bitcoin to, and then he inputs the address where I told him to send it to, how much to send, and he hits send. And that's kind of it. But there's actually a lot more behind the scenes, and we're going to do a whole video actually showcasing how this works, demonstrating it step by step. And Kevin's going to send me 10 Bitcoin.
Colt's going to send me 1 Bitcoin. 0.1 Bitcoin.
Okay, you're going to send it to me, though. Anyway, so that's one way of getting Bitcoin. So the third way of acquiring Bitcoin, definitely the least intuitive, the least approachable, is to generate Bitcoin to get it through mining. Mm-hmm. So mining is basically the way that new Bitcoin are created or found, just like with mining gold. A lot of people go out and they don't use pickaxes anymore, but
pan for
all sorts of machines and crazy equipment, but they all mine, they try and find gold, and some people do, and they're rewarded for all that work. So in the world of Bitcoin, it's an analogous process, except rather than hitting a rock over and over and over, what are they actually doing? What's the point of it?
So we're gonna explain this in greater detail in the coming videos, but miners are the people who maintain the Bitcoin network. So the competition is quite complicated, but really what's going on is, for maintaining a copy of the ledger and for facilitating new transactions, you gradually earn Bitcoin.
Right. So computers are hard at work behind the scenes, and some of them are rewarded with new Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get into a lot more detail. We have a whole section on mining later on.
Oh, there's plenty more there.
Okay, so those are the 3 ways of getting Bitcoin. Remember, the first one, an exchange, is the easiest, most approachable way, but it also has the main shortcoming of relying on a single point of failure. You can also exchange Bitcoin. So you could do something, someone could send you Bitcoin, or you can send Bitcoin to someone else. And then finally, you could get Bitcoin through mining.